Welcome to the Coaching Case Study Showcase. My name is Sindhu. I'm your host from the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter, and I'm very excited for this session. So, coming to this very interesting showcase, this is a 90-minute session where our accomplished moderator will showcase a coaching success story from his repertoire with his very successful corporate client and show how this coaching engagement unfolded from concept to implementation and the benefits it has brought to his client. Our moderator today is someone who is very zestful, possessing a delightful sense of humor. Gaurav Arora, founder director at X-Monks, Inspire Coaching Systems. He is an MCC credentialed coach who has been a former president of ICF Hyderabad Charter Chapter and was also on their editorial board. It would be interesting to know that Gaurav is the podcast host for the X-Monks Drive and facilitator of the online webinar series, Coaching Matters. He has over 16 years of experience as a facilitator, coach, mentor, and speaker. At his heart, he is a storyteller who uses various methodologies and techniques to powerfully communicate his message and create a breakthrough. In his work, he has been significantly influenced by ontology, and some of his highest values are authenticity, creativity, collaboration, continuous learning, and innovation. He founded X-Monks or Inspire Coaching Systems in 2009 and started the social development initiative I Own in 2016. Gaurav is an international partner, faculty, and coach mentor to Ericsson Coaching International and the Leadership Circle in India. He is the curator of the Coaching Conclave, a unique platform for people to come together and share insights on coaching. A very warm welcome to you, Gaurav.
Hey, thank you so much, Sindhu. Such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, in conversation with Gaurav Arora, in this coaching case study showcase will be Gaurav's corporate coaching client, Dr. Pradeep Narayanuri, Chief of Talent Management at Tata Steel and formerly Head of Tata Steel Management Development Center. He will be joining in this conversation a little later, but let me go ahead and introduce him to you. Dr. Pradeep is an electronic and communications engineer from Andhra University and a fellow of IIM Bangalore with specialization in organizational behavior, design, and human resources management. An extremely accomplished HR professional, Dr. Pradeep has over 25 years of experience consulting extensively for organizations, both as an external and internal consultant, in the areas of visioning, strategy development, organization, structuring, role clarification, job evaluation, grade structure, competency frameworks, employee assessments, performance management, career management, high potential management, leadership development, succession planning, culture assessments, and engaging surveys. Dr. Pradeep holds several certifications, including Prosci Change Management Practitioner, 360-degree assessments, California Psychological Inventory, job analysis and competency design, and organization development, to name a few. Dr. Pradeep deeply cares about developing employees to take a sense of investment, accountability, and ownership in the vision of their companies. Though Dr. Pradeep isn't here yet, I would like to extend a very warm welcome, and we would once again welcome him when he comes up. So with this, I turn over the conversation to you, Gaurav. So Gaurav, tell us, how does it feel to be presenting at the ICF India Coaching Conclave, and what do you propose to do, share with us today?
No, I think it's a sheer pleasure because I remember my days when I was a part of ICF chapter and the journey began. And since then, it's like eating, breathing, sleeping, drinking, coaching, and coaching. And I remember first time when we organized one of our international conferences in Hyderabad. And it was absolutely a task in the year 2012-13 to bring people to evangelize coaching. But I think the team was so phenomenal, who helped each other, who supported each other to evangelize coaching and talk about what coaching is and what it is not. And looking at coaching the way it has evolved, not only as a practice, but as an industry as well. It's very overwhelming because at one point in time, coaching was considered as a remedial tool. It was primarily for a very niche market for C-suite executives and the top leadership teams. And how I've had the privilege and the honor of seeing the phased approach, the way coaching as a practice and coaching as an industry has evolved from niche to bringing coaching to middle management, to making sure that we have got internal coaches, and how we can democratize coaching with the new platforms coming all over the world. I think it's such an honor. And I have a soft corner for ICF because I think ICF has been extremely, extremely kind to me. And if not for coaching or ICF, I don't think that I would have had the privilege of being here with such august participants, because I can see a few of the names who are present here, be it Emunal, be it Bhaskar is there. And I can see there's so many people who are there, right? So it has been an absolute honor. One is to stand here to speak about coaching, and especially in the presence of people who I've had the privilege of learning from. So let's take a dive, because what we are going to talk about is the case study in the space of coaching. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a case. I'm going to present a PowerPoint presentation. Creating the coaching culture in an organization, and I'll be assisting Dr. Pradeep, who is a part of Tata Steel, who actually led this initiative at that organization. And leading any such initiative like building the coaching culture in a mammoth organization like Tata Steel, trust me, it was not an easy task. But the way he did that job, the tenacity that he brought in, the resilience that he brought in, the openness that he brought in was so commendable. Just watching him driving that initiative was so much of a learning. And I often share that, you know what, I've been blessed to have a wonderful team that does all the work, and I just get the glory. So in this case also, supporting me in my team, there were several people who were involved, be it Preeti Verma from my team, or the other coaches who were involved, be it Surbhi or Lata. All these people were very much available to drive this initiative from our ex-monk side, and just representing them. As I mentioned, these were the people who were actually making sure that the processes are in place. We are making the right communication in time with all the people who are going through this initiative. And on behalf of that, I'm representing this. And on behalf of the Tata Steel organization, Pradeep was leading that. Let me just share something with you, that there are several organizations in the past 10 years that we have had the honor of working with in terms of building the coaching culture in some capacity, form, and shape, and leading a coaching initiative in the organization. And when I'm saying leading the coaching initiative, what I mean is, be it Tata Steel, Virtusa, Air Products, GIA, Sapient, Natural Remedies, ICICI Lombard, Sennheiser, Titan, MetLife, Deloitte, Hero. These are all organizations where we have not only coached people. It's not only the one-on-one coaching that we have done. We have trained their senior leadership teams. We have trained their senior middle management team, their middle management team, and the people who are individual contributors, so that they can imbibe in the coaching behavior. And when I'm using the coaching behavior, I'm bringing in the element of the way they talk to each other, the language part of it, the way they imbibe the philosophy, the principles of coaching, right? So what I'm going to talk about right now for the next 30 minutes is the best practices that we have been able to bring in different organizations. And then we would invite Dr. Pradeep so that we can double click on what we did for Tata Steel, the process that we went through, so that all of us can pick up at least one thing from this conversation that you can implement that tomorrow. My personal take is that unless I can explain in a way that my 5-year-old or my 81-year-old kin members, family members can understand that, I think I'm not doing a job well. So I'll try and keep it as simple as possible so that we can apply that in an organization called family, in a system called family, so that you can use that with your family members, so that I should be able to use that with my father, so that I should be able to use that with my niece or my nephew or my team members for that matter. So let's take one step forward, right? So if you look at all of us, be it a part of the family that you are a part of, be it a part of the organization that you are a part of, a community, a society, or the political party that you are a part of, right? All of us are striving to bring in more engagement in the system that we are a part of. At the same time, one of the things that we all strive for is that we all would want to be happy in our lives. We would want to have more engaged team members in our employees, where people can express themselves from their true gifts, where people can engage with each other and can experience connection, and they should be able to contribute to each other's life. And why not? At the end of the day, these are the three basic desires of a human soul. When we talk about expression, when we talk about connection, when we talk about contribution, if not this, what else do we strive for? If not to express ourselves and experience freedom and peace, if not to connect with each one of you, if not to contribute to each other's life, what else do we strive for? And especially if you look at the last 2.5, 3 years, we all have gone through some really terrible times. And today, especially when I connect with people, I just check with them, hey, how are you doing? Tell me what's happening in your life. 8 out of 10 times I hear things, I listen to what is not being said. I see a different world in their eyes. I see less of aspirations, more of fear. I experience a resentment and resignations in their eyes. I experience a deep sense of sorrow. It could be the loss of a job. It could be the loss of a family member. It could be going through some really difficult times. And we all have experienced that. And thus, any organization, any family, any team, what we are looking forward is, can we have more engagement? Can we have more connection within the organization, within the team? Can we have more happy people, right? Every time when I come across a family member of mine who's not happy, who's not joyful, or a team member, when the team member is not happy, or when she's not happy, or he's not happy, there's something that happens to me. I feel that, what, I'm not doing my job well, and I get into my guilt trip. And if you do the research part of it, they say there are different ways to bring that connection, bring that expression, and bring that a sense of contribution and happiness and engagement in the family, community, team, or a society that you're a part of. The answer lies in coaching. Right now, when we're talking about that, the answer lies in coaching. If that is what it is, now then how can we actually apply that? Right. So before we even talk about that, let's try and understand that anything, if we do as an ad hoc, will not be able to create that sustainable results for anyone. So in order to create something sustainable, we have to talk about the system that we are a part of. We have to talk about the culture that we are a part of, right? So in order to erase traffic from the roads, we cannot erase the traffic on the roads of Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, wherever you are from, unless we know that even I'm a part of the traffic. It's not that I'm a part of the traffic only, I am the traffic, right? So we need to understand that from that space. So let's try and understand that. How would you define culture? There's a definition that I'm going to show for you, and then I'm going to simplify that. It says that the spoken, unspoken, written, unwritten norms, values, behaviors, assumptions that you could actually smell in the organization, that you could actually sense in the organization. Just because something is not written on the wall does not mean that's not a norm. Just because something is not written on the wall does not mean it's not a norm. What it means is there are several aspects of an organization. There are so many power dynamics that take place in an organization that we are not even aware of. So in order to understand the culture of an organization, just enter the organization, just notice the way people are sitting, who's speaking after whom, the language patterns that the person is using in an organization, and the way one behaves in an organization talks a lot about the culture of an organization. Some time back, somebody was talking about Tatas, and I think, what, I personally feel that for me, Tata is a pride. For me, Tata is a religion. For me, Tata is an organization which is very, very pious for me. Not because we have done a lot of work. In the last 15 years, I've had the privilege of serving Tata Steel. I've had the privilege of serving Tata Motors. We've had the privilege of doing a lot of work with Titan, Tanishq, Titan Eyewear. In fact, to a large extent, my coaching career started with Titan. And if not for Mr. Ramadas, who was the HR head of Titan at that point in time, I don't think that I would have achieved my ACC. I owe my ACC to Mr. Ramadas. That's the kind of relationship that I've been able to build with Titan. If you look at the last sentence, it says in a very simple way, the language people use in an organization and the way they behave talks about the culture. Now, how can I actually bring it closer to you? Now, take a moment for a while. and see what kind of language pattern do you hear in your family. How do people behave in your family? Who eats first? Who eats last? Who speaks after whom? Who are those people in your family who have been given extra privileges? Now, if you just notice, if you just scan through that, the language patterns and the behavior, it talks about the culture of your family. Now, similarly, the same parallel can be drawn in your department. The same parallel can be drawn in the organization that you are a part of. The same parallel could be drawn in the society, in the city that you are a part of. The same parallel could be drawn in the country that you are a part of. And I'm not surprised that why the culture in Delhi is very, very different from the culture in Mumbai, or for that matter, in Bangalore, or in Chennai, or in Jaipur, for that matter. Why? Because every city, every system has a different culture to that. So when we are talking about culture, what is really important is to understand that on one hand we are talking about culture, but what's happening on the other side, right? What is coaching culture? And that is what we need to understand, because we are talking about creating a coaching culture. Now, for as long as I've been a part of coaching, and I've been talking about since 2005, 6, and 7, people are talking about creating the coaching culture, but very few people have been able to decode that. So there's a lots that I've read, there's a lots that I've learned from the masters that I've been blessed with to be associated with them, and of course did a lot of experimentations and touching and burning your hands, and at times what the client is expecting from us, we might not be able to deliver that. But what is really important to understand is that a culture, when a coaching approach, is the key aspect of how the leaders, managers, and the staff engage and develop all their members, all their team members, all their people, and engage with them. And the interesting part is all of you are coaches here. And in case who might not be, for that matter, I'll be more than happy to address any question that you have. You know the essence, the spark in coaching, where you allow the other person to reflect on what he or she is looking forward to. And you just be with that person. You hold the space for that person to move from where he or she is to where he or she would like to be. And that's the process right now. How can we bring that culture in an organization? Would it be easy? Absolutely not. Because on one hand, I'm talking about that human souls have got the basic desires as expression, connection, and contribution. At the same time, the context that we are born into, the family that we are born into, the country that we are born into, and the organization that we are a part of, we all have a need to control things. Because in case I don't control things, what would happen is there's a lot of fear that I'm experiencing, right? Now, one is we all have a need to control. At the same time, most of us would want to have the predictive environment. I have to understand what is it that I can expect in the very next moment, right? So now just imagine what we're talking about is let go of your control, let go of the predictive necessity that you have. And on the other hand, we are talking about coaching, where you allow the other person to empower themselves, you allow the other person to take decisions on their own. And there could be some kind of ambiguity as well. Now, that's the kind of culture that we are talking about. And while we are talking about that, there was a research that was done. There was a research that was done in the year 2004 as per Harvard Business Review. And what they said is that when you create a culture of coaching, the result may not be directly measurable. The results may not be directly measurable in terms of dollars. So what we are talking about right now is, on one hand, the business is saying that I'm willing to invest $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 in this initiative called creating the coaching culture. But on the other hand, what we are talking about is that the results might not be measurable in terms of dollars. Why? Because that's a different process altogether, right? There's a process called Kirkpatrick model, 3 levels of evaluating the results that you are getting. Is it easy? I don't know. But at the same time, but we have yet to find an organization that cannot benefit from more candor, less denial, richer communication, conscious development of talent, and disciplined leaders who show compassion for people. Now, take a pause one more time. Do you know of any family that has been able to grow and expand in terms of intellectually, spiritually, psychologically, in terms of financially, where we don't have the candor, less denial, richer communication, conscious development of talent, and disciplined leaders who show compassion for people. I'm yet to come across that. I have friends who have been able to invest time with their family members, with their children, and every time when I see them, when I speak to them, when I speak to their family members, I realize how happy that family is. And that is really important. Now, can you measure that in terms of the dollar? Now, just imagine that you are using an initiative that is allowing you to have that more richer, full, happier, cordial relationship in an organization. How are you going to measure that? Now, that was the challenge at the global level. Now, that's a macro level challenge that we are talking about, right? So in order to create the coaching culture, we know it's going to be beneficial, and yet there is a macro level challenge. Now, this is not enough here. This is not the end, right? We have challenges in creating a coaching culture as well. Now, let's quickly scan through that. What are the possible challenges that might come across when we are talking about creating a coaching culture in an organization? We don't know why we would like to create a coaching culture. Is it a fad that everyone is following? That's the reason that you would like to have the coaching culture, or is it something else? Are you aware of that? Just because IBM is investing huge amount of money on creating the coaching culture, just because Google is investing, just because NASA is investing a lot of money, just because Virtusa is investing, or Sapient is investing, or Microsoft is investing, or Infosys is investing huge amount of money, you should invest your money, your dollars in that. If the answer is not clear, that's one of the biggest challenges, right? Commitment of time. Coaching requires a lot of time. Somebody asked me, Gaurav, how much time does it take to become a coach? I said, I can train you to learn how to do coaching in 3 days' time. That's my commitment to you. But in order to become a coach, I think it's a lifetime journey. If you ask me, I've personally been in the space of coaching for 15, 16 years now. Have I become a coach? My answer is no. I'm still a student. I still love learning about coaching. And I'm no way saying out of humility. Absolutely not. Uh, I know the garbage that I carry within myself, where I fall flat on my face, where my own ego comes in the game, where my own arrogance show up. And I'm aware of that. And that's the reason the journey of a coach is a journey of a human being. It takes lifetime for sure. So on one hand, I'm talking about, do I have the patience to become a coach? But at the same time, if I know somebody who's on the same path, do I have the patience to hold that person? And that's the reason it requires a lot of time commitment. ROI for creating a coaching culture. This is exactly what Howard 2004 mentioned, right? There's no direct way to measure the ROI. Now there are different ways where we are talking about, as we are talking about, but we are still reworking on that. Misalignment of what leaders say and do. You know, when you're a CEO of an organization, when you are heading sales, on one hand, you're talking about coaching, but on the other hand, when the sales numbers don't meet the targets, you get a lot of pressure from the upline, right? When you get that a lot of pressure, what would you do? You, of course, you will cascade it down, unless you've been able to build that muscle of absorbing that pressure. Team driving this initiative does not get the support always. You know, in different organizations that we have worked in the past, there's a set of people, 5-7 people who are driving that. There's an HR department who's driving that, and then, you know, they will not get the support from business. Remember that. Creating a culture, be it a coaching culture or any kind of culture, it's not HR's role. It's the business role as well. You know, unless the janitor in your organization understands what you're talking about, unless the CEO understands what you're talking about, there would not be any alignment. And unless you've got alignment, what would happen is you'll fall flat on face. And thus it's extremely, extremely, extremely important to bring that alignment. And every time there's a misplaced alignment, will not be able to call, hey, you know what, that's the culture. No, that's not the culture. There's a set of people who behave in a certain manner. At the same time, in the same organization, there is another set of people who behave in some other manner. So you cannot say just because A is more dominant, that's the reason we have that. And that's the reason why it takes huge amount of time. It's not a very technical solution to a challenge. We require a very different approach, which has to be holistic, when we need to talk about the processes, where we need to talk about the systems, where we need to talk about the rewards and the recognition. What behaviors are we recognizing and what behaviors are we rewarding? inability of the team to be comfortable with ambiguity. That's what we spoke about. Coaching perception in the organization, it's still evolving. It may take a little less time now from where we were 15 years back to where we are. I think we have already traveled a huge path already, and we are onto the highway right now. So it might not take us to cover another 100 miles in the years to come, but it would take some or the other time, holding people accountable, right? Now, on one hand, we are talking about these are the challenges. Now, if there are so many challenges, we cannot even measure ROI, we cannot have, it's not easy to implement that, then why would we want to do anything about that? Let's do something else as well. Now, every time when we say that the cost that you are paying for something, and the rewards that you are getting, so we need to understand what's the cost and what's the payoff. If the payoff is more than the cost that you are paying, of course you would want to get into that. And if the cost is more than the payoff, you'll say, let me not even get into that, because we are paying extra for the results that we are getting. Now, we have already seen the cost which is required to get into that. Now, let's look at the payoff here. That's exactly what we are looking for: better acceptance, better awareness in organization, better communication, more employee engagement, job satisfaction, collaboration, teamwork, transition, right? These are all things that we have been able to see that. So on one hand, we are talking about metaphorically, on one side of the bridge, we have got the cost that you are paying, which are the challenges, right? Whether the challenge which is mentioned by Harvard or the challenges that we all would encounter to bring in that. On the other hand, we have the payoffs. Now, as I mentioned, if the payoff is more than the cost, it's worth it. It might take us some time, but it's worth it. And this is how we started this initiative. When we evaluated that, and be it all the examples that I've shared with you, right? I'm not talking about particularly right now, and then we will dwell deeper into Tata Steel case study, because I would not want to share anything which is confidential. So I would allow people, representatives from Tata Steel, to share whatever information that they may want to share. So in order to create a coaching culture, we need to look at three things, right? We create a coaching culture. There's the phased approach to that. We need to understand what is it that we need to do before, what is it that we need to do during, what is it that we need to do after that. So that's a phased approach. Now let's quickly look at what has to happen before that. Every time we are talking about culture, creating a culture, and especially the coaching culture, we need to understand why are we even getting into that. So there are some very basic questions that we need to understand. Now, let me just share that. What are those basic questions? First question is, what is your why behind the coaching culture? I mean, what's the pain area? So in one organization, it could be employee engagement. It could, for another organization, it could be performance. For the third organization, it could be visibility. For the fourth organization, it could be building your brand equity in the market. So somebody may want to enhance the employee engagement. Somebody may want to, build the visibility in the market so that I can attract the right talent. For somebody else, it could be performance. For somebody, it could be leadership development. So unless we understand the why behind the coaching culture, I think we'll not be able to do a job well. We need to look at what kind of resources are we willing to invest into that. Be it finances, be it people who are going to drive that, be it the time span that we have. What we are looking forward to create a coaching culture in the next 2 to 3 years. What it means is that it has to become number one priority. Otherwise, we will not be able to do that job well. And the third one is, how are you going to measure and track the progress? Now, measure in terms of, as we are talking about employee engagement score. We might talk about the NPS score. We might talk about the overall attrition in the organization, the retention in the organization, or different parameters that we have. It could be, as I mentioned, the brand equity that we are building, right? So once you've been able to identify these three questions, then once you have the right answer for that, I think we are good to start with. And of course, there are several templates that you can use. We have been using different templates to assess where the organization is, to understand the readiness of an organization. Just because somebody is saying that, Gaurav, can you help us to create the coaching culture? If it's just a business proposition, it's very easy for us to say yes to that. But the question is, when you're accepting a business proposal, it's a partnership. Are you setting up the organization for success or failure? And if it's to set the organization for success, you need to be very, very clear about that questionnaire to understand where this organization is. And is the organization even ready to bring the coaching culture? Because it would require a lot of confrontations. I remember one of those conversations with one of the senior leaders with one of the organizations, where in the first 2 hours, I challenged the CEO minus one, and everyone was looking at me. Now, in the first 1 hour itself, it's going to be the end of the story. But the kind of homework that we did, we were clear that we can challenge these teams. These people might not agree to everything that we are saying, but they would not reject that on the face of it. So it talks about the readiness, the willingness, the openness of the organization. And what is this organization that we are talking about? We are talking about the people who are driving that, isn't it? Who are those people who's leading this team? So that's the basic homework that we need to be very, very clear about before you check the readiness of the organization. If they are ready to invest in, do we know the why part of it, the willingness, and the track the progress? Once that is done, anything that they have not yet experienced, they will never dive into that. And for a couple of organizations, what we did was we gave them the texture, the flavor, the smell, the experience of coaching, where we provided our coaches. 20 of our coaches were coaching a set of people in the organization at different levels. So for them, that was their exposure to what it means to be coached. Once I've actually experienced and tasted, then I will take my family to the same restaurant. You know what? You should visit this restaurant because this restaurant serves a really good meal. The ice cream is really good. The service is really good. And that is really important. At the same time, I remember the first program that we did was Manager as a Coach. Because even as much as you are testing the readiness of the organization, even the organization is testing you. Do you have the necessary mettle? Do you have the necessary experience to deliver on your promise? And if you can deliver that at this level, that's where you will get a green signal from here, and that's where you'll move to the next level, and then you'll move to the next level. Investing in any relationship is like you have to earn the trust. For me, I remember my association with Pradeep goes back to almost like 10 years now. And I've always been grateful to him because he has always given me opportunities like, Gaurav, would you like to do that? Would you like to do that? And my role is to make sure the investment of time, energy, money, and hope that the organization is putting in, they should get several folds return on that. Because at the end of the day, my stakes are still less as an organization, ex-Monks, Ericsson Coach International. The individual who's bringing you in, his stakes are more, right? So please make sure we create the good experience. That was the thought process with which we got into that. And this is the time when you're already done with the before part. That is where the during part we are talking about, right? Now, let's understand that what is coaching? The coaching is the process of facilitating a conversation. You all are aware of that. For an individual that allows her to expand perspectives. Now, the question is, through the experience of coaching, can we allow the other person to shift the perspective? Now, that was the objective with which we entered the organization, the first phase of the organization, when they have to test waters, when they have to experience what it means to be a coach themselves, right? There's some neuroscience of coaching we brought in where we spoke about that every time you allow the right principles of coaching, the brain produces oxytocin against the cortisol, because once you have got more oxytocin, there would be more engagement. It would be much more happier instead of the stress that gets produced in the organization, which has got the toxic culture. And that's where we speak about the mindset of a coach, right? So these are the very basic mindset that we brought in here. Now, with this, the organization could really test the waters and understand what coaching is, what it is not, what it means to go through that experience. And this is where I think collectively, and this is where it began, and now I'm specifically going to talk about Tata's team. Sheer privilege, as I mentioned. This is where the entire team of Tata Steel, it was led by Pradeep sir, and our team, we came together to create what kind of phased approach that we would like to bring in. And when we brought in, we said, hey, there are some key strategies that we need to be mindful of. The key strategies around who are going to be the brand ambassadors, who are going to hold the baton for coaching at Tata Steel. How can we actually link the outcomes that people can expect from coaching with the business? At the end of the day, in case it's not assisting business, we are not going anywhere. How can we make sure that we invite the senior leadership team to get into that? What kind of phases which are required? And not only at the one end where you would be the coach, but there are a set of people who would be on the receiving side. I'm sure you have learned something, you go back home, you apply the tricks, and the kids would say, you know what, dad, you know what, mom, you learn something from outside, you apply that onto us. We are not guinea pigs for you. Same is the case with your organization as well. When you learn something new, you go back to the organization, you apply that with your team members, and the team members will say the same thing. May not say the same thing on your face, but deep down, that's exactly what they are thinking. You know what? You learn something new, you come back, use that as a guinea pig. Give us a break. And that's where it's extremely important, as much as you are getting trained as coaches, the team which is getting on the receiving side, they should understand what is it that I can expect from you as a different behavior, and recognize and reward. So these are the key strategies that we followed. Integrating coaching with the talent development, the leadership development work that you were already doing. This is the step-by-step approach that we used, be it commit to the proven coaching framework. We got into details, discussions, debates. What is the right coaching framework that we should be using? How do we need to educate people, engage people, and expand their understanding of coaching? How do we need to prepare people so that they are ready for the change? Take inputs to understand the expectation on a regular basis, as we are already walking on this path. What's going well, what's not going well, where do we need to regulate up, where do we need to tone it down? All these things we learn and embed and sustain the coaching culture. I'll just going to quickly take you through a very, very important framework that we use at Tata Steel, which we call as the arrow model, where we start with the coaching position, rapport being the laid foundation, establishing the contract, making sure this is what we are looking for, creating an experience action plan. This is the framework that we use at Ericsson Coaching International, the art and science of coaching, recognized by ICF. You know, in India, we have trained over 1,500 people. Now, specifically in Tata Steel, I'm going to share with the numbers, which is mind-blowing, right? Because very few organizations are willing to invest that kind of money on their people. And it happens because of the people who are holding the baton. People like Pradeep, people like Sanjay at that point in time, people like Atray in the organization, people like Lakshmi, all these people, they were holding the space so well, right? These are the people who led this initiative. Without them, we would not have been able to do that. And now this was the most important thing that we created at Tata Steel. I think all the credit goes to the Tata Steel organization and the team members who were leading that. What we did was, we first analyzed how many people do we have who are reporting to the MD. And let me tell you, in my experience, Mr. TV Naren, who heads Tata Steel, I think he's the best leader I have personally come across. Not even once I've heard anyone talking anything which is not in alignment to who he is in the organization in the last 6 to 8 years, be it the guard bhaiya, the janitor, the driver bhaiya, or the aisle, all the senior top leadership team that I've had the honor of interacting with. Not even once. And people have all the great things about him, right? And that's where, when we looked at the different layers, be it top leadership team, the senior leadership team, the mid-level, the frontline managers, and the individual contributors, we looked at, hey, how many people do we have? And once we looked at that, that's where we started to work with how to educate, engage, and expand people. Now, if you look at 64 hours, 32 to 64 hours, 16 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours, and this is what we applied there. What it means is that the senior leadership team of 14 to 16 people, they went through 8 days of program. Now, just imagine, when you are investing 8 days of program, it's not only the investment that you're making, it's the opportunity cost which is involved as well, which is many folds, right? These people are heading verticals in the organization. The kind of investment which is raised is huge. Now, why did they even go for that? Because we wanted to have a complete buy-in. If a person at the middle level leader is saying, you know what, I'm in a program, and if he's talking to a senior leader or a top leadership team member, they'll say, oh, please go ahead. Are you going through a program on the art and science of coaching, or leader as a coach, or a manager as a coach, right? If you're going through that program, they know what we are talking about. So the buy-in, getting the buy-in was extremely important. So we started from 2 different levels, both at the giving side and the receiving side. So if you look at the giving side and the receiving side, what it means is the senior leaders and the mid-level, those are the drivers in the organization. Those are the people who actually drove that initiative. And from that space, on the other hand, if you look at the frontline managers and the individual contributors, since they were not going through a program on helping people to become coaches, these are the people we acclimatize them. That what is it that they can expect from coaching? When your leader has learned something new, what shift in the behavior can they expect from them? Now, rather than telling more, they would be asking more. Rather than sharing their experiences, they would be creating a space where you could be yourself. What does it mean to feel empowered in the coaching culture? Now, these are the kind of questions that we went through. And as we move on, I will hand it over to Pradeep sir right now to understand that what is it that what kind of numbers did we experience, right? Now, this is what we did. Now, overall, if you look at not specifically to Tata Steel again, in different organizations, we have experienced that 80% of those who received coaching report positive impact in the areas such as performance and communication and skill. 65% of people experience more engaged, right? 36% of the organization offer coach-specific training to new leaders. And when we talk about 36%, that's what I'm talking about. Companies like Tata's, companies like Virtusa, companies like Deloitte, right? We have had the honor of training some 120 people at Deloitte. We have had the honor of working with over 80 people at Virtusa. And this I'm talking the last few years, right? One step at a time. And as my teacher, Dr. Merlin says, changing the world one conversation at a time. So thank you so much. We have Dr. Pradeep already here. Thank you so much, Pradeep sir. Such an honor having you here.
Yeah, thanks Gaurav for having me here, and a very good afternoon to all those on the call, and pleasure and honor to be here. Yeah.
Super. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get into a conversation with Pradeep to understand the kind of impact that they have been able to create in the organization and whatever little assistance that we could do. We did that, but I'm sure what we are talking about, the results that Pradeep is going to share, is no way totally because of the coaching thing, right? Because in an organization, there are a lot of other initiatives that they did. And I know the kind of hard work that Pradeep brings in, because I've had the honor of knowing Pradeep for several years now when he was with Times. And I remember meeting him at ITO, talking about what coaching is at that point in time. I was comparatively younger, much leaner with gray hair, with black hair, right? So, and I remember my conversation with him, and at times I wonder how could I have that kind of conversation. It's such a stupid conversation I had with him. But yeah, that's how we all learn. So Pradeep, let's try and understand that, we are talking about creating a coaching culture, and Tata's is one of those very few organizations in the country which has been able to do that. Before that, we did something very similar for one of the JK companies in the country. In fact, the JK company that Ericsson worked with, we had the honor of getting a Prism Award from ICF as well, right? Now, we have not moved to that level yet, but I'm sure we have done a lot of work. Now, would love to understand, what was your why when you decided that now it's the time to bring in coaching in the culture, in the DNA of the organization that you are leading? So if you can just share with us, what was your why behind the entire episode?
Yeah. So for us at Tata Steel, I think one of the key aspects that we focus on is in terms of how well people are engaged and how well they're being cared for. And that's a critical element of the DNA of the organization. And when we found that there's a scope to enhance the level of employee engagement further, that was one key aspect wherein we thought, while we did a lot of things to see how we can enable managers at various levels to actually have a more coaching and developmental kind of approach. They went to several leadership programs and many interventions. But what we felt is that maybe a one-on-one conversation, a dialogue, will actually help people to make the mindset and behavioral shift that's required towards actually creating an enabling culture and thereby increasing the level of engagement with people. So that was one key trigger in terms of getting into or exploring coaching as a potential method, whereby we could step up the level of involvement, engagement, commitment of people across the organization. A second one, of course, is in terms of how it might help us to actually develop leaders, both present and for the future, because that's an essential value element of how we can actually create a culture where people are engaged and how we can actually develop them. So that was one key trigger in terms of getting into or exploring coaching as a potential method, whereby we could step up the level of involvement, engagement, commitment of people across the organization. A second one, of course, is in terms of how it might help us to actually develop leaders, both present and for the future, because that's an essential value element of how we operate at Tata Steel, and therefore how do we equip people further as they journey or progress as a leader, that they become more and more in a style that is involving coaching, collaboration, and which facilitates innovation, experimentation as well. Yeah. So these were the reasons why we were seriously looking at what intervention might be most effective or potent in terms of enabling this kind of engagement, growth of leaders, collaboration, and innovation. These were the factors. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Pradeep, for bringing that. If you look at, this is exactly what we were talking about, ladies and gentlemen, that human brain is wired for connection, and under stress, under threat, we get rewired for protection. So this is exactly what we were talking about, the oxytocin and the cortisol. And once we realize that we can create a culture that would allow people to create more oxytocin, so that people can collaborate. And that's where he was talking about the more engaged, more one-to-one conversation. And just for everyone's benefit, just to give more context, that was the time when the organization Tata Steel was looking forward to merge or to buy Bhushan Steel, if my memory supports me, Dr. Pradeep, right? And that is the time we started talking about what does it mean to be a future-ready organization. When we are bringing a different culture, how do you ensure that you accept the other person's culture, right? It's like marriage. When a new person is coming in your way, and if you're not willing, if you're not open to understand where the other person is coming from, in the very initial phase itself, you can create strikes that might create a crack in the relationship. Now, same is the case when we're talking about mergers and acquisitions. In a context like Tata's, in the context like Bhushan Steel, two different beasts altogether. And when one is merging to the other one, how can I be so welcoming so that when I welcome the other person, they feel one with us? And I think that is where I remember my conversation with the top leadership teams and senior leaders, that what are kind of challenges that they are facing when they're accepting people from the other culture, and what are the challenges at the cell level, at the somatic level, that they're not been able to overcome. And I remember a few conversations where it's a joy and the tears coming down together, both coming from a space of self-actualization, coming from a space of transformation that leaders are going through, and the potential results that they would like to create. Such a beautiful experience. Since Dr. Pradeep, we are talking about more engaged one-on-one conversation, being the future-ready organization that Tata Steel has always been into, what kind of deployment of resources were you willing to put in so that after 5 years you can look back and say, that's the investment that we made, and today this is where we are. So we have actually got several folds of ROI on that.
Yeah. So while we get into the resources part, I think just to sort of set the right context around this. So I think it's important to be clear what is the purpose as to why we are wanting to bring coaching in a major way into the organization. And that we've already discussed as to, in our case, primarily it was about employee engagement as well as growing leaders for the current and future. But then also there's a need for adequate leadership buy-in to be able to get into a major initiative like this. And in the case of Tata Steel, there was a high level of commitment from the top management. And as a way to actually further our purpose in terms of engagement, they thought that this is a good way to look at how we can really make a difference in terms of how we operate. And as part of that, we had a lot of leaders at every level go through coaching, and there were about 35 people who went through the complete full-fledged coaching certification, and of which 10 are like really the top management team, and we have another 25 senior leaders who are again fully certified through the 64-hour coaching certification program. And thereafter, we had around 200 leaders, senior leaders, go through a 3-day module on coaching, which we call the Art and Science of Coaching. And subsequently, we also had the mid-level leaders, about 400 of them, who actually went through coaching for high performance, which was a 2-day program. And while we did all of this in terms of enabling leaders at every level to be able to demonstrate and practice a certain style, which is non-directive, not non-prescriptive, and more developmental, right? So while we did this, we also wanted people down the level in the organization, most likely the recipients of coaching, that they're aware what coaching is all about and how it could lead to their development and what to expect when you're paired with a coach, right? So we did that for the frontline managers and the individual contributors. So therefore, we wanted a complete awareness and understanding and appreciation of what coaching is all about, and therefore, this is the kind of magnitude of exposure uh, into actual one is okay to know what are the elements of coaching, how a coach is different from a manager and things like that, but specifically in terms of the skills related which you can practice back at the workplace, right? So that is what the emphasis was on when we looked at the various interventions and programs around coaching. And the thought was that to begin with, we would bring in external coaches as well for people at middle and senior levels, but that we should have our own pool of certified coaches internally, right? So that we are less sort of dependent on the external, both in terms of having to engage them and in terms of potential cost implications that could be there if we want to scale up. So from both these counts, we thought it's important to have an internal pool of certified coaches as well. And in general, everybody being aware of what the skills uh, entail, or what is involved really when you get into a coaching conversation, and what kind of outcomes could you expect, right? So this, I think, is the scale at which we visualized the rollout of the coaching intervention. And even today, coaching still happens in various parts of the organization. Some of it driven by internal coaches and managers who went through coaching programs and skills around coaching, as well as a few still with external coaches. So it's something that is accepted in Tata Steel as a good way to actually look at focused development of people customized to their unique needs of development, right? So this is in terms of the scope of the people that we actually had to look at, and it is still ongoing. So therefore, more and more will be onto this platform whereby they actually got into the skills of coaching. So in addition to this, when we talk of resources, then there is, of course, a small core team that needs to manage this project or this engagement end to end, right? So for that, also we had a dedicated but a small team that actually focused on ensuring the program management of all this, right? Because it's one thing to visualize and sign up for something, but the actual implementation is more or equally critical. And therefore, to see that there's a smooth sort of rollout of the whole thing in terms of the scale and the timelines that we looked at, right? So therefore, that's a second key aspect, actual program management. And the third one is, of course, the investment that the organization needs to make, right? So unless we are adequately convinced and confident that it would have an impact in terms of business performance, in terms of culture, in terms of how we think, interact, work with each other. So unless there's going to be a significant impact on that, so the investment would obviously not be worthwhile, right? At the scale at which we have envisioned it. So therefore, that was also an equally important factor to consider and to look at as we went forward. Yeah, I think these are, in terms of resources, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Just look at the kind of investment the organization was willing to bring in, be it the opportunity cost, be it letting your senior leadership team to go and attend the 8-day program, a 3-day program, a 2-day program, or a 4 hours program, and covering almost like in 3.5, 4 years, we covered anywhere between 35 people from the senior leadership team and the top leadership and the senior leaders team. They went through a 8 days program, followed by a 3-day program for almost like 200 people, 200 and something people, right? And another set of 400 people went through a 2-day program, and then a set of another program who attended the 4 hours program, so that you understand what coaching is. At least you might not be able to coach the other person, but you should understand what you can expect from a so-called coach. And this entire journey, there were several hiccups, I remember. It could be as simple as making sure that the facilitator should be in alignment to the senior leadership team. We should be able to give the relevant examples. And there are times when it totally backfired. I remember my conversation with Dr. Pradeep, where he said, you know what, this person is not gelling in the example that he shared. It just backfired. What should we do now? There were a couple of times when we had to, where we could not even lead the program. So what would happen? How are we going to engage that? Several challenges, and it was a sheer fun for me at least. So, Dr. Pradeep, I remember as an organization, you went through an entire process of finalizing an organization that with which you should be partnering. Just curious, without naming any other organization, on what basis did you decide out of 4 or 5 people who went through the process, what is it that you were looking for that gave you the confidence to go ahead and partner with this particular company called Ericsson Coaching International? So if you can just share that process as well, because that is extremely important. In step number 1, as I share, identifying the right framework is extremely important, which is in alignment to the organization that you are, the culture that you already have in the organization. So if you can just throw some light on that, please.
Yeah, so we did do our due diligence on proposals received from various organizations. We were wanting to, of course, look at what would make the best fit for our organization. And one of the key aspects, and there are 3-4 of them that we looked at, is that in terms of being able to develop the coaching mindset and the coaching skills, which could be practiced and where people are able to gain adequate confidence to actually practice those skills, right? From this perspective, looking at the curriculum offered by different organizations into coaching, right? Different firms into coaching. So that was one factor that we looked at. That is the curriculum rigorous enough whereby it can give adequate exposure and insights to the skills involved in coaching, actually ensure some coaching practice, and also would it be possible to give an experimental coachee, right? So that there's no risk when we roll it out in the organization. So also the task of to the people certified on coaching, giving a coach who could be from an NGO or anywhere else, but who we are willing to sort of apply the skills learned and see if it's working. And further, what is the learning that can be gained in terms of. So therefore, one is the rigor of the curriculum, the extent of skill practice that's available. Right? Because at the end of it, people should feel that, yes, it's a great thing and I can do it now. So, or I should be willing to experiment at least and feel comfortable doing that. The second thing is also in terms of is the framework, etc., is it certified by any, or is there a credentialing by a well-known body in the space? So we knew that, okay, there's an international coach federation, and so we were wanting that in terms of the curriculum that's being offered, in terms of whatever is being promised, but is that also, does it have the sign off or affiliation with ICF, right? So that was also one factor that we looked at. Of course, the cost aspect also was one of the things that will come in. But primarily, I think it was these 2 things. Can it actually do what it is supposed to do? That is, equip my people, the leaders, to be able to practice coaching. I think that's the other is, while the curriculum may be good, sometimes it happens that the faculty or the resource persons available to deliver this intervention, right? Are they, up to the mark as well? So how much of experience do they have actually doing one-on-one coaching? How many hours of coaching have they done? Because while conceptually it's possible to say what coaching is and what are the skills that may be there, but if I have not personally done that for enough number of hours, I may not know what are the actual challenges that a coach and coachee go through when they get into this kind of an engagement. So it was critical to look at the faculty or the resource persons. Do they have adequate experience of hands-on coaching, right? So I think that was another factor. So we did look at what is the pool of coaches that could be offered to us. Yeah, so therefore, in summary, then it's about the curriculum. Is it skill-based? Does it give enough practice confidence? What is the kind of faculty, resource people who will actually get engaged? Is it affiliated to ICF, right? So I think these are the things. And also, does it sort of an experimental, if you want to do a coaching with somebody, can you provide some people who can be coaches actually, so that our people can work with them? And finally, the cost element as well. So I think this is the overall thing. And also it also depends on the extent of comfort you have with the agency or firm that is and what it is saying or communicating, right? So that also matters.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr.
And to
Pradeep.
what extent are they committed also is a factor, and how flexible are they?
Yeah. Thank you.
These
I
are
loved it, the four factors that you mentioned, and the last one was the finances as well. I remember our initial conversation. In the initial conversation, finances was the first one. I didn't know that's the last one. Otherwise, I would have reworked on the pricing. That's one. But I think thank you for bringing what you're talking about right now, because as much as, ladies and gentlemen, the calmness, the subtleness, the innocence, the professionalism that you're seeing on the face of Dr. Pradeep, let me tell you, behind that, he's very high on eye for detail. He will grill you for what you're going to offer. He will hold you accountable for what you said that you're going to deliver, and you have to deliver that. I think as a team, that's where how you hold people accountable is extremely important, because a vendor is a vendor for as long as you have not partnered with him or her. A vendor is a vendor for as long as you're not partnered with her. But the moment once you partner, you can't afford to deal with that person or that organization as a vendor. I think I never felt like a vendor in the organization. To an extent, they were kind enough. The office where Dr. Pradeep sits in, they gave me a dedicated office, a dedicated cabin on which it was written Gaurav Arora. That's a separate thing, that they had another Gaurav Arora in the team. So that's a separate thing. So, Dr. Pradeep, what are the initial challenges that you faced when you brought in the concept, hey, we would like to bring in the coaching culture? What kind of pushbacks that you experienced from your team? Because at that point in time, coaching was not that much in demand. What kind of pushbacks did you experience from senior leadership team, and especially from your finance team? I'm sure you would have experienced that as well. So anything that you may want to share on that front?
Yeah, so since it was a top-down approach, right? So we had the buy-in initially to go ahead. So that we should get into coaching as a approach, so as to enhance engagement, transform culture, grow leaders. So that was never in question. So, but it was more about the practicality and the logistics that is involved in doing this kind of this scale of an engagement, right? So while people are willing and interested and even committed, how about their schedules? Do they allow? Do their current priorities and schedules allow for doing this? So I think from the program management point of view, there were challenges, which I would say are more operational and logistical. But of course, as people went through what coaching is all about and what are the skills and what are the key shifts that may be required, so I think it is that they were fine going ahead and doing this, but how do they make time for it, and how do they engage adequately to be able to make a difference? And at some point later, while we were running this, also this COVID situation came up, right? Which meant that it was no longer doing it face to face and physically, but it was doing it remote. So how well can we connect remotely on a coaching call, right? So that was another thing that came up as we went through. So I'll tell you the key steps in terms of program management, right? Because maybe people here may be interested in that. So in terms of so we have a set of internal certified coaches, we have a set of external coaches that we want to work with, and we need to identify the coaches who would be part of this. And so how do we identify coaches? Having some clear criteria around that, right? And how do we position coaching to a coachee, right? It is an investment we are making to grow them into leaders, and it is not some remedial action or measure that we are taking with anyone, right? Because we think you have the potential, because we think you hold a promise to be a future leader, and that's how you are being invested for in coaching, right? So that positioning, I think, is critical from a coachee perspective. And from a coach perspective, it's about, given their multiple priorities, getting their buy-in to commit to take on a couple of coaches, right? So this again, while they may be keen, but how do we practically make it possible for them in terms of being able to be available and engage the way we want them to? And what is the kind of structure? So the structure must be minimalist so that it gives flexibility, but at the same time, from a tracking perspective, it should let us know how it's progressing, the engagement with each coachee, right? So what is the kind of framework or template against which we should be tracking each coaching engagement, right? That has it taken off, have a few one-on-one sessions happen, and who are the stakeholders to be involved at different points of a coaching engagement. So for example, somebody from who's a HR business partner, maybe for their area, so they are potential stakeholders in addition to the sponsor, who is the manager of the coaching, right? So therefore, we had this sort of elaborate framework, but giving as minimal structure as possible to hold it together, right? So these were some of the things that were critical, and then it is really about scheduling and executing as per the schedule and making course corrections as we go along. But this is a sort of fairly intense or involves a lot of effort, and that needs to be done well. So I'm sorry, I missed, I mean, maybe on that question, I wanted definitely to mention what is involved, because it's not just saying that we are keen to go for coaching and we have identified the right partner to work with us and to say that here it is and this is the schedule. Practically, there'll be a lot of things to manage for it to run smoothly and meet the desired objective.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But
I think that's where your
okay.
Yeah. I think that's where your team came in really well. I mean, the entire team that you have, be it Smita, be it, as I mentioned, Sanjay ji, or you, or your entire team. I think Archana, all of them, they came really well to ensure that it is executed, it is delivered really well. That's one. I think what I loved was, irrespective of the challenge, of course, you've already mentioned that scheduling the time part, the last moment, one of the leaders will say that they've got a very important meeting with the MD, or they've got an important meeting at Bombay House and they have to travel. Despite that, I think the buy-in that we got from the senior leadership team and the senior leaders was phenomenal, which at that point in time was very unheard of me. At least I did not see that, because I remember when we rolled the bringing external coaches to work with the leaders in the organization at Tata Steel in Jamshedpur, in Calcutta, and a few people in Mumbai. I think the initial tripartite meeting that we had, where the coach was supposed to meet the coachee, the mapping part that you were talking about, Dr. Pradeep, in the presence of the manager or the line manager, I think that itself took a lot of time. And the managers were willing to invest that time, which for me at that point in time was very unheard of. Because unless the manager is willing to invest time, money, energy, and hopes in his or her team, it will not go anywhere. I think that is what went really well. So you spoke about the internal certified coaches and external certified coaches. You spoke about positioning the coaching in the organization. You spoke about mapping the coach and the coachee. In the entire process, one of the things that often business is going to ask you is, hey, how is it going to benefit the organization in short term and the long term? I'm sure you would have received that heat very often, right? How did you manage that? How did you show the results in short term and in long term? Is there any specific measure that you had, the results that you could demonstrate, or how was it for you internally?
Yeah, so for us, the employee engagement survey that we do, so that offers one index in terms of leaders' engagement interaction with the team members. So that's one source. The other is a 360 survey we do, and we have a behavior called people development or unleash potential. So we do have scores on this as well. And over time, we have seen a significant shift in terms of the 360 score on people development, and also a reasonable shift in terms of the engagement score, wherein how the managers are being rated by team members. That is one part of the overall engagement survey. because that is a determinant of the level of engagement and happiness of the employee as well, or satisfaction of the employee. So therefore, I think these are a couple of indices. But actually, if you see the work environment and I think the business outcomes and the level of collaboration happening within and across projects. So I think coaching has had a role to play in all of that as well, because people are more conscious about how they engage with each other once they're exposed to coaching. So one is, of course, that you want to develop someone who's a coachee, but in the process of developing someone who is a coachee, the coach himself or herself also undergoes a certain transformation, right? And which anybody who's been through this process would be familiar with what I'm saying. So therefore, oftentimes it can happen that the coach thinks that am I good enough to coach the coachee, right? And in this process, whatever expectation or discipline the coach expects from the coachee, the coach also tries to model that. And in this process, there's a transformation over time that happens for the coach as well, right? So yeah, so I think in terms of the way people interact, engage, collaborate across various initiatives, in terms of the employee engagement score or index that we have, in terms of the 360 score, particularly on people development, which is one of the 4 behaviors that we focus on. So I think that's what gives us a measure of whether it's helping us really or not.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradeep. Any last sentence that you may want to share with the audience before?
Yeah, so just a quick one. I know that here we have people who are already coaches and maybe some who are prospective or wanting to be coaches. Either case, and those who are already coaches would know what I'm saying. While there are many skills and competencies that ICF may mention, and different organizations, coaching firms may build their curriculum around that, right? But there are 3 or 4 key things what I'd like to say if you want to be successful as a coach, right? First thing is, are you passionate about developing people and do you really care for people? So if that is not at the core of who a person is, it's difficult despite all the competencies to be able to coach. I might master the competency, but still it will not come through the way it should, okay, for the coaching. So the second thing is, are you curious enough and are you patient and enough to listen to what the other person wants to say? Can you suspend your theories and assumptions and your sort of mental model? Okay, so can you do that, and can you give space for pure listening, right? Wherein you are able to truly appreciate what the other person is saying. And not everybody can do that because it's not easy. It takes a lot of effort and energy to actually do that. So therefore, the second one is this, right? I should want to develop people, but I should be able to listen as well. The third one is to avoid being directive and prescriptive, because I may think that I know the answer to this. I don't know why this person ends up struggling so much. So therefore, why don't I suggest 2 or 3 things and then the person will be happy, go and implement, right? But that's not what we want to do in a coaching engagement, because we want the coach, we believe the coach is good enough to come up with their own solutions. The coachee, sorry, is good enough to come up with his or her solutions. And that's a key assumption around human potential that we have. So therefore, can you hold it, right? And therefore, can you ask powerful questions or relevant questions rather than trying to direct, trying to prescribe, trying to guide, right? To the extent possible, can you hold back on that? So that's a third key requirement, right? A fourth one is how quickly can you grasp the organizational context in which the coachee is operating. So whether, if you're an internal coach, obviously you have greater visibility into context, but that brings in the challenge of holding things confidential. If you're an external coach, so then it's about how quickly can you grasp the organizational context where the coachee is from, right? So I think these are some key things what I would suggest, that if you want to be successful as a coach, then these are sort of essential elements. Yeah, I think that's what I would like to. I'll pause here and yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradeep and Gaurav, for this very captivating discussion. We have a few questions from the audience. Can we take them up now?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
So we have Ajit Singh Rao, who is asking, what is so different in the Tata Steel engagement from other companies which you have worked for that makes this very unique?
Shall I take it on, Dr. Pradeep?
Sure, Gaurav.
From an external partner, and then,
Mhm.
for me, Ajit, thank you so much for the question, by the way. And for me, Tata is just not an organization. I've said this to people in the past. I say it, I'll continue to say that. If not for Tata's, I don't think that India would have been where it is. And for me, serving Tata's is like serving the country. It's a religion for me. It was such a pious intervention for us as an organization. And when Dr. Pradeep was talking about the resilience and how open the organization is that they were partnering with, and I did not have any question or doubt on that we will not be flexible. So we will bend backwards to make sure that this intervention is effective and delivers result for which they have hired us for. It was not about success or not being success. And working with Tatas, I think when you meet people at Tatas, you'll realize that one is they are very kind. They are extremely kind. They will treat you with all the respect. They will give you all the space that you want to ensure that you do your job really well. Not even 1% of the talks will go where you'll have to invest your energy on things which are not fruitful, both for you and the organization. One of those very few companies which were willing to invest that kind of time, money, energy on coaching. Not many organizations were willing to invest on that. So I think these are the few factors which were extremely important for us to partner with. And as every time in the last 16, 17 years that I've been showing up as a coach, I've been a student of coaching, I tell people that in case you don't see value, we are going to return your money back. No questions asked. Whether you are going through the program that we run called the Art and Science of Coaching, or when we are serving an organization, no questions asked, right? We are not going to ask you a question that why didn't you like that? What was missing? Blah, blah, blah. Of course, we'll ask all these questions that how could we serve you even better? But first, we'll return your money. Now let's see that how best we can serve you. I think they were willing to give us space even when we were faltering. There was a program that one of my co-facilitators was leading. This gentleman is from Europe, and the program did not land well. There was another time when there was another co-facilitator from Bulgaria. She was leading the program, and the program did not land well. Now, Pradeep and his team was extremely kind to say, hey, Gaurav, you know what? I don't think that this is working. Can we bring some other element to that, right? Are you willing to lead it yourself? Are you willing to change the gears? So the kind of conversation that was happening, it was not like a company has hired a company to deliver something. It was a team which is working together to ensure that we reach the Mount Everest together, right? So that's the kind of space that not only Tata Steel, but I think Tatas are willing to give you. That's what makes Tatas, and that's the reason we are privileged to have Tatas in India, our own brand. So pride. So thank you, Ajit, for the question.
Thank you. Sangeeta Mathur asks that how did you go about assessing the business impact? This perhaps Dr. Pradeep can take this up.
Yeah, so the business impact, like Gaurav mentioned earlier, so it is traceable to various things, not just coaching, because when you see a good result, so it's difficult to claim all of that for coaching, right? There are many other changes in terms of strategy, approach, ways of working that may have also contributed to the outcome. And this is one of the challenges in all developmental initiatives, and including coaching, right? So what we look at, therefore, is in terms of is it creating a positive environment, and is that therefore getting reflected in the kind of engagement index that we have. Second, what we look at is, since there are 360-degree that we do for all people in the organization, and particularly for leaders, we look at people development, how are they doing on that, and we take that pretty seriously. So there's been a significant shift on that. So I think the engagement and related to the 360 on people development behavior, these are measurable shifts that we can see. We also see a positive impact in terms of business deliverables and the way we are executing key initiatives across the organization and the level of collaboration that happens across all this. So, but it's difficult to sort of trace it and claim that it is only due to coaching intervention that we did, right? So I think this is what I could say.
Okay. I have a follow-up question on this, Dr. Pradeep, and even Gaurav. Gaurav, at the very outset, you said that the measurability of coaching culture in an organization is very, very difficult. So I'd like to ask Dr. Pradeep that did you have to put any investment in the measurement systems themselves, in addition to investing in coaching, to be able to measure the coaching culture impact or whatever, apart from the business impact, you know?
So when we look at culture, actually, what we can see is just behaviors, the way people think, the way they act, and the way they interact or relate with others, right? So that is what we can, the visible aspect of culture, right? And therefore, in a 360, how people are perceiving you, whether it's your manager, your peers, your team members, or your internal stakeholders, in terms of how you're doing this interaction or sticking to your commitments or whatever, right? So I think that is a measurable aspect, and we didn't do that specifically to measure the ROI and coaching. But when we look at specific coaching engagements, right? So this is I'm saying with regard to the coaching culture. So we look at behaviors, and again, when in an engagement survey, there are things like if there's a disagreement, is your manager open to listen to you, right? And is your manager engaging respectfully with you? Right? And is the manager able to provide clear direction and guidance? Is the manager able to provide feedback or feed forward? So these things are the kind of items that are part of the 360, part of the engagement survey, where team members are also responding. And we have such items on the 360 as well, where in addition to team members, you have others responding. So these are some things which help us gauge whether overall it's moving fine. But with respect to every coaching engagement that is there, one-on-one engagement, there are specific development goals that are identified at the start of the engagement. And the ROI on that specific engagement can be seen in terms of whether the two development goals that were identified at the start, and maybe some of you or all of you would be familiar that what does success look like on this coaching engagement, and you may use a scaling technique or whatever. So you say that currently on this behavior I'm on 5 and I want to be at 7 by the end of this engagement, and what does it look like, and in terms of actual manifested behavior, and then you look at the end of it whether how your stakeholders perceive you on those same areas, right? So this is an ROI for the specific engagement. But ROI overall for the organization, I think we need to look at things like 360 and the engagement index, etc. And see, the business impact has been positive in the case of Tata Steel, but how can I trace it specifically to one initiative, right? That's the
right. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's Venkateshwar and Subramaniam's question as well. Like, while measuring the overall ROI, how do you isolate these parameters and get the metrics across? Which is what led to my curiosity also. Are there even any systems which can actually do this? You spoke about a lot of questions, qualitative questions, but I guess then there are qualitative and then the quantitative, and we all hate the 1 to 10 scale by now for sure. I think at least yes, new coaches do measure your commitment on a scale of 1 to 10 and so on. So
when you're looking at your impact on people, right? When you're looking at how people are getting impacted, you have to go by their perception of what you're doing, right? Absolutely. So I may say that I may say I have transformed myself, okay, but the way I'm coming across to people and how they are perceiving me, that is reality for them, and therefore if that doesn't shift, right? And that's why you find for example, Goldsmith, etc., talking of the stakeholder-centered coaching, right? Because
absolutely,
they want not only change, but your stakeholder to say that you have changed. And what we do in a 360 or in an engagement is actually to look at that.
Wonderful. So Taran Kohli is asking, is coaching in corporates possible only if it is top to bottom approach? Because once the top management is convinced, the allocation of resources gets easier.
Sorry, I couldn't get the question. So the first part of it.
Yeah, is building a coaching culture possible only when you start from the top and then cascade downwards? Yes. I think that's what he's trying to ask.
So when you're talking of culture, then it has to be from the top. But when you're
Okay.
talking of as a manager, can I be a leader and a coach? You can initiate at any level, right? Because you're making a difference for your team when you do that. But if you're talking of a culture of an organization, it has to be essentially driven from the top, because the culture change cannot happen otherwise. Yeah.
Right. Thank
Yeah.
you for that. We have 2 minutes, so I'll just take one last question. Sorry, Gaurav, did you have
So,
something to say?
may I just add one more sentence to what Dr.
Sure,
Pradeep
sure.
said. You know, it's like it's not a question of is it possible to create a culture if we don't start. It's not even a question, because I have learned how to respect my guests at home from my father. I have learned it's important to show shukrana in your life from my mother. I have learned resilience, patience from my mother. I have learned how to be generous from my sister. It's not even a question. There's no other way, because all of us, I believe all of us have got dysfunctional families. All of us have got some of the other kind of traumas. And the only way to heal each other is to demonstrate what it means to live a life from the set of values that you would want the next generation to have. So it automatically cascade down from that space. So sorry, I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
No, absolutely. I personally resonated a lot with the family dynamic. In fact, you started your conversation with that, and for every time you went back to the family example, that's that's very amazing, because uh, anything that we achieve with clients, if I don't go back and see some of it working at home, even I don't feel personally fulfilled. So I guess we are all learning from our families every single day. So one last question, Siddharth Shukla is asking, does development goals from coaching engagement get impacted or compromised when the organization uses the internal coach vis-a-vis external, I guess?
Yeah. So when you're using internal coaches, and so Gaurav, I don't know if you have your view, but based on my experience and typically in an organization, so when we are looking at internal coaching and development, so we typically look at people who are not in the line of hierarchy, right? So therefore, somebody who is entirely from a different department, a different division or unit, is becoming a coach to somebody who is in another area, and therefore, as long as there's a environment of trust where both of them are able to believe that it will be confidential, whatever their engagement is. So to that extent, it will not impact the development, right? Only when there's an environment of distrust, in which case actually the coaching engagement will break. It won't happen. So if a coaching engagement runs end to end, that means there is sufficient trust and an understanding or appreciation of value that is getting created in the process. And if that really happens end to end, then definitely the development goals could be realized. Yeah, there won't be any compromise. An absence of trust, breaking confidentiality, being prejudgmental because the person is from the same organization and maybe I know this person, so we avoid that thing in the pairing process. Yeah.
Good. Sorry. Good insight, Dr. Pradeep. Thank you. So we are on top of 90 minutes. Thank you so much, Dr. Pradeep and Gaurav. Any closing remarks you have? And we will leave our audience with that.
Let's hear from Dr. Pradeep.
Yeah, so I would like to wish the very best to the different people on this call in terms of whatever their endeavor, uh, in terms of coaching or even if anything else beyond that. So I would wish them the very best. But when you're applying coaching, the focus must be around behavioral change. Okay, for something that is not as intense, you don't have to use coaching. Okay, coaching is a one-on-one engagement where if you're wanting, I mean, the coachee must be wanting to shift behavior, right? So then it's a very potential way of providing the enablement. But my general belief, and that's why I'm saying this, is that we should go no deeper than is required for anything that we are looking for. So only if you're looking at a real behavioral change and a mindset shift, that's where you should explore coaching as a method. Yeah.
Very profound.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you. Gaurav?
No, I just want to say thank you to, express my shukrana to so many people I could see. I've had the honor of knowing for almost like 10, 15 years, starting with Pankaj Dikshit is there, Winston is there, Sangeeta is there, Tarun is there, Amy is there, Bhaskar is there, Ritu is there, Priya Sharma is there, Manisha is there, Bhushan is there, Lovely is there, Sandeep is there. All these people, I think I've grown watching all of you. So thank you so much for all the encouragement and always been there next to me, encouraging me. It's such an honor to be here once again. Sinthu Santhu, thank you so much. The way you held the space for both of us. Much shukrana to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you. It's a very heartwarming message from. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this wonderful session, and it's going to carry this memory forever. Thank you so much. Bye.